Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to do my December reading wrap up. Alright guys, it is time to see how I finished up the year of 2025 when it comes to my reading. It wasn't a terrible month, but it also wasn't a amazing month. So like the majority of the year, I guess we ended up somewhere in the middle. Hopefully 2026 is a little bit more 5-star, 4-star heavy. Fingers crossed. On the bright side, I didn't have any DNFs this month, so that is great. If you are new to my channel, the way that I do my book reviews is that I talk about my lowest rated to my highest rated. I will say this month I read a book that I decided not to rate at all, and I will be talking about that first. That does not mean that that was my least favorite book of the month. If anything, I would say it was one of my favorites. However, since it doesn't have any rating, I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it in at the beginning because that just feels right to my brain. But before we get into the actual reviews of the books that I read, I'm gonna go through some basic stats. I didn't have any complaints last month when I did my stats a little bit differently, so we're gonna go ahead and continue doing them that way. All right, got my handy dandy laptop here because we do have more stats to go over than I used to. So first off, I read 8 books, which I believe is becoming a relatively normal number for me, not a number I am upset about. Page count wise, 1,850. That is a little bit higher than last month. I did read only one audiobook this month. That's become pretty normal as well. So I only had 6.60 hours of audiobook listening time. As far as my average rating goes, it was only a 3.88. I am not happy that it is below a 4-star. I usually prefer to be above a 4-star. I will say that I had a 2.5-star this month and a 3-star, and the fact that I decided not to rate one of the books I enjoyed probably was a little detrimental to my average rating. I haven't checked to see what my average rating for the year is yet, so I'm hoping that this doesn't bring the annual average below a 4-star. That being said, 4 of the books I read physically, 1 was an audiobook, and 3 were ebooks. 4 of the books I owned on my own personal TBR. 1 was a library book, and I did KU this month, so 3 of the books I read were from KU. As far as genre goes, again, obviously a lot of these books are multiple genres, but I just kind of try to latch on to the biggest genre that they are. So we had 2 contemporary romances, 2 fantasy romances, 1 horror, 1 contemporary, and 1 historical mystery. Going into some of the diversity stats, 4 of the books had queer representation, which feels a little lower than usual. Part of me blames that for the lower average rating because I love me my queer books. We did have the specific representation of gay rep, bisexual rep, and pansexual representation this month. 3 books were written by POC authors, which is higher than last year, but not quite 50%. Here in 2026, I'm going to be trying to read 50% POC authors over the year, so it would be convenient if every month it was around the 50% mark, but it was better than last month. Now, known queer authors, I only know for sure that one of these authors is queer, but like I said, this is known queer authors. I'm obviously not going to dig around and be like, are you gay? Are you gay? So that is at 1. Disability representation, we had a little bit less this time. We only had 1 book that had physical disability. When it comes to physical disability, I count anything that isn't anxiety or depression. We had one character who had ADHD in this book. That was a prominent part of the story. And then one book with mental representation, because we had one character who had anxiety. As far as the gender goes, no non-binary authors this month, but we had 2 that were by male authors and 6 that were by female authors. So you can see the majority were by female authors, which is pretty common for me. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the one book that I didn't rate. Again, just because I'm talking about it first does not mean that this is my least favorite book of the month. Far from it. That is gonna be One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akkad. This is a non-fiction story. When it comes to non-fiction stories, unless I can say confidently that it is a 5-star read, I tend not to rate them. And this one, while it was an incredible read, highly recommended and well worth the hype that it's been receiving this year, I felt like I couldn't confidently give it a full 5-star rating, so I just decided to go ahead and not rate it at all. This is written by a journalist who is focusing a lot on the genocide that is occurring in Gaza right now, and throughout the story we are following him throughout life a little bit. It has almost a slight memoir aspect to it, because he doesn't just talk about his experience with the genocide. He is talking about his experience as a journalist during other major events throughout his journalistic career, and the way that he responded to them, the way that the government and the general population was responding to them, and kind of commenting on those responses and how at times the way that people decide to respond to certain events is heavily impacted by what they think is the right response. So based off of the title of the book, you can see One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. Obviously, he's talking about the fact that right now there's a genocide occurring, and there's a lot of people, me included, who are very outspoken about how terrible this genocide is, how there should be an end to it, how uncomfortable we are with the fact that our tax dollars are being towards the weapons that are killing innocent women and children and men. And there unfortunately are a lot of people who are also very outspoken about how this needs to be done, how we're doing the right thing, and how Israel has the right to defend itself, which I personally don't think is what Israel is doing at this point. And then there's also a big group of people who are kind of like in the middle. They're not actively supporting it, but they're also not actively against it. They're just kind of like, well, there's got to be a reason we're doing this, and there's a lot of people, and specifically in the government, who are supporting it, so how wrong could it be? There's consequences that occur if you speak out against it at times, and they're just not willing to take that active risk. And so he's talking a little bit about that throughout the story, the fact that there are so many people who don't speak out against something until it's safe to do so. And obviously, speaking out against powerful forces can be very scary, but it's also something that's very necessary when it comes to making sure that we're keeping those powerful forces accountable for what they're doing. So I think that this is a really important read. I'm sure that a lot of the people that are picking this up are the people who think like me, who are more than happy to say what's happening is a genocide, and what Israel is doing is absolutely disgusting and unacceptable, and there is no excuse for doing what they're doing. But I do at the same time hope that there are some people who are hesitant to say that, who read this and gain the courage to do so, to gain the understanding of how important it is to speak out about this. So when it comes to ratings, like I said, I couldn't quite give it a 5-star. The main reason is I struggled a smidge with his writing. I ended up writing a review on my Goodreads, so I'd love for you to go ahead and check that out because I was able to sit there and kind of mull it over a little bit, so it's probably a little better than me just word vomiting at you right now. But I felt like he was sometimes losing the plot a little bit, where it felt like he wasn't able to concisely put his thoughts onto paper because he was filled with so much rage and sadness about what was occurring. And on the one hand, I fully understand that. When I'm making an argument, I remember once when I was talking about the trans community, that as I really got into it, I burst into tears. You know, I fully understand that when you are really angry and passionate about something, that sometimes your ability to verbalize that just goes right out the window. But I felt like as someone who was writing this and who has a career in writing about things that upset you, and having the process of editing, that maybe some of these conversations should have been a little smoother instead of leaving me a little bit confused, because there were times where I was rereading sections because I was like, that is so powerful, I need to read that again. But there were other times I had to reread it because I was like, wait, what are you trying to say? Where were we going with this point? So that was the one reason I couldn't quite give it like a full 5 stars or anything. But otherwise, I think that he had some powerful lines in here. I mean, as you can see, I did quite a bit of annotating in here, and I would like to take a moment to read a couple lines from here just to give you kind of an idea of what you can expect from this book. So one of the quotes that really stuck with me the most, and I would say that it didn't really change my view on anything, but it kind of really solidified it, where it was like this concept was kind of floating around my head. I was like, this is probably how things are. But the way that he wrote it, I was like, yes, now I will be able to use this line and this scenario, this analogy, I guess, within conversations that I'm having with other people. So this author is an immigrant. He was originally from Egypt. Eventually his family went to Canada, and he now lives in Portland, Oregon. So he is someone who rather intimately knows the experience of immigrants. And the line is, all I know about the other side of the planet, all I needed to know was that it wasn't like this. In the unfree world, the free world isn't a place or a policy or a way of living, it's a negation. National anthems and military flyovers and little flag lapel pins are all well and good, but for a life stunted by a particular kind of repression, the driving force will never be towards something better, but away from something worse. The harbor never as safe as the water is cold. And that was one thing that I always was like, when it comes to people's view of immigrants, they're always talking about how they're coming here to take something. They're here to take our jobs. They're here to take our houses. They're here to take this and that and blah, blah, blah. And they just want what we have. But I never felt like that because, I mean, to me, I would not want to leave my home, my family, my culture, the place where my roots are, just cause. Not even just because of a job. I feel like I would need something monumental to uproot me and my family and push me to another place, especially a place like America, where a lot of people just aren't very welcome. And to be able to look at this line and be like, yes, people are fleeing. They are leaving a place. They are coming to you because they are running from something behind them. They are not running to you so they can snatch something out of your hand and take it for themselves. So I really love that line. At the beginning of every chapter, he writes this quote to kind of encompass something terrible that is happening. And at the beginning of chapter 4, titled Language, I think is one of the most impactful quotes. When the past is past, the dead will be found not to have partaken in their own killing. The families huddled in the corridors of the hospital will not have tied their hands behind their backs, lined themselves against the wall, shot themselves in the head, and then hopped into mass graves of their own volition. The prisoners in the torture camps will not have penetrated themselves with electric rods. The children will have not pulled their own limbs out and strewn them all over the makeshift soccer pitch. The babies will not have chosen starvation. When the past is past, but for now, who's to say they didn't? Who can truly be sure but the killers and the dead? I feel like that is such a powerful line when it comes to the concept of who is telling you what is happening, because it's not the dead. The dead are not speaking out on their behalf because they can't. It is the people who are killing them who are able to tell you why things are happening the way that they're happening, and they're gonna skew it in their favor. They're gonna tell you that there is something that these people who are dead actively did to put themselves in this position, and that they are somehow partially to blame. And I feel like he, in the most horrifying visual way possible, showed you what a ridiculous concept that is, to just accept the fact that these dead people, these thousands of dead people, all in some way deserved it. So I really do think you gotta read this book. I really do. I know that this book is on a lot of people's best book of the year list, especially people who read a lot of nonfiction. This is the kind of book that is gonna stick with you. It's the kind of book where you're gonna go back and you're gonna read some of those quotes. I mean, reading that last one, I honestly felt like I was gonna start tearing up. It's an emotional punch of a book. I'm a little bit surprised that I didn't put this on my top books of the year. I know that video hasn't come out. Spoiler alert, it's not on there. There is one nonfiction that I read that just hit me a little bit harder than this one, which may seem surprising. Like I said, I haven't filmed my best book of the year yet, so I'm not sure. I think I might have to put it at least as an honorable mention because this book is so impactful. Or maybe I'll even put it as one of my best books of the year. It's kind of hard because I just finished it, so I'm a little worried about like recency bias. We'll see. And like, please read this book. Please. It is short. It took me quite a while to get through it because it is such an emotional read. You have to take care of yourself while you're reading it, but yeah. A really great read. All right, I promise I'm not going to talk that long about all the other books. It's just, that's the kind of book you got to blabber about just for a little bit. Now we're going to jump into the worst books of the month. So a bit of a 180 here. We're going to talk about the one book that I gave 2.5 stars, a huge disappointment for me, and that is Spiked Hot Chocolate by Riley Adams. Riley Adams is an author who I've read before, who I've had in plenty of recommendation videos because I loved her book Trouble, and this book was so boring. It was 78 pages long, and it was the longest 78 pages of my entire life. I don't know what it was about this book, but I could not get into it. Every time I picked it up, I was lucky if I got through one paragraph at a time. It was I don't know. It was such a weird experience. I picked this book up Christmas Eve because I was like, yes, it's 78 pages. I'm going to start at Christmas Eve, finish at Christmas Day. It's going to be a wonderful, cozy Christmas time. And instead, I was like, you're ruining my Christmas mood with this book. This is a novella romance. It is very insta-lusty, insta-lovey as a novella is, and I'm not a huge romance novella girly because I don't like that insta love, insta lust. However, I've had it done successfully before, and so I put my trust in this author because she has impressed me in the past. But unfortunately, no dice. This did not work for me. I just felt like while I saw the potential in this relationship, that didn't know these characters. I felt like I didn't know who these characters were, and that made me think, well, you guys don't really know who you are, so how do you have these really strong emotions for each other? It just felt really unrealistic and unbelievable. I found myself skimming the smutty scenes because I'm someone, when it comes to smut, really needs a strong emotional connection, and I didn't feel that, and so I had no interest in their lovemaking. Didn't have any interest in that. And so this book ended up being a real drag for me. It did not work. There wasn't all that much that happened. It kind of felt like we were moving from the diner to the house to the skating rink to the house. It just felt like we were kind of moving our characters through these little dates that they were putting together. But anytime there was this opportunity for like deeper conversation, it would just be like, and then we spoke for 2 hours. Okay, I mean, you don't have to give me like a 2-hour conversation, but if you could maybe give me some of the highlights, some of the important aspects of the conversation that make me go, oh wow, they probably really connected on that on some deep emotional level. So unfortunately, this book was a big letdown for me. If you watched my worst books of the year, I believe that this was a last minute addition to that, unfortunately. So I will obviously be trying this author out again. I do have another of her full-length novels on my list, but when it comes to novellas, I guess she's just not for me. Next, we had one 3-star rated book, and this was my one audiobook of the month, and that is Moon on Crusted Snow by Wobgeshig Rice. And this was a book that I decided to pick up for a couple of reasons. One, it was giving wintry vibes, and two, I was hoping to squeeze in one more book by an Indigenous author by the end of the year because I had only read 2, and that just felt unacceptable. This book I have pretty mid feelings about, hence the 3-star rating. I do tend to enjoy post-apocalyptic stories, and that is what this book is. We are following a small Anishinaabe community who is living kind of like on the outskirts of society. They've just started to get more like Wi-Fi and electricity and all that stuff within the last few years, and one day all of that kind of turns off, and they're kind of like, well, you know, we're still kind of new to this, it often glitches, so I guess we'll just kind of wait for it to come back on. However, it doesn't come back on, and 2 of their community members who were attending a college in the nearby town come back and let them know that this has occurred all over the world, and things are falling into chaos. And so this community kind of needs to start to figure out how they are going to survive this situation. And the community is kind of split into those who have continued to live more by the old ways so that they are still rather knowledgeable in living without a lot of technological advancements. And then there's a lot of people who have become over reliant on it. So we have that situation of certain members of the community having to take on a bulk of responsibilities in helping the community survive, and there are some complicated feelings that come along with that. Things get even more complicated when a white survivor ends up showing up, and he's definitely sketchy. Honestly, even as a white person, if I saw some bald skinhead looking man show up, I'd be like, you can go ahead and leave. You can get out of here because you smell like trouble from a mile away. This book is told primarily from the point of view of Evan, and he is someone who is in an interesting position. I think he was a good character to follow. He is a husband. Well, actually, he's not a husband because they're not legally married, but he is essentially a life partner, and he has 2 children with this woman. So obviously, he has some people he really wants to protect. He is someone who cares deeply for his family, including his parents and cousins, and he's also someone who is working closely with the council. So he's kind of in this position where he is in a way kind of a regular civilian because he's not like a chief or actually actively on the council, but he's always kind of on the sidelines. So he's a good perspective to have in this story. My problem was this book was boring. It just was. It was a very slow paced, almost slice of life, but make it in the apocalypse kind of vibes where everything was very slow moving. The stakes, despite technically being high, never felt overly high. And I feel like any sort of threat that was being presented was resolved relatively easily, and I feel like any sort of consequences that may have happened at the hands of this threat were maybe not that big of a deal, or the author just decided to not make a big deal of it. So I felt pretty lukewarm about everything that was happening in this story plot-wise. However, I did find that I was quite intrigued by these characters. I thought they were really interesting. I really did like Evan as a character. And so I decided I'm definitely going to go ahead and continue the series because it seems like in the second book, they're going to go ahead and leave this community to find better land to live on, because this isn't actually like their ancestral home. This was somewhere that they were forced to move by the white man. And so I am interested to see them kind of move on from this community and move out more into the world to see what's going on there. I'm hoping that the plot will be a little bit more interesting. For now, the only thing that's keeping me invested in the story is the characters. I think that if you're someone who enjoys a slow moving, more character driven story, this will definitely be for you. While I do enjoy a character driven story, I do need to feel like there's something moving the plot forward, and I just didn't really get that with this book. So 3 stars, very middle of the road, but at the same time, I do think it's worth checking out, and I will definitely be checking out the sequel. Moving on, we had one 3.5 star read, and that is gonna be Red by Annie Carty. I ended up taking part in Bailey's Shelf This Book Club. I was the co-host for November, and we did a live show on this book. So if you're interested in seeing that, I will go ahead and link that and her channel down below. I ended up picking this book for the book club for a couple of reasons. One of them is that this was one of the books that was on my bingo board for 2025, a specific book that I wanted to pick up, and I was running out of time. So I was like, well, what better way to push me to read it than to make it a book club pick? The other reason was because I felt like it would be an interesting topic to discuss. So in this book, we are following a young girl who is, I believe, 16, 17 years old, and at the beginning of this book, she ends up getting an abortion. And she is someone who is a member of the church. She's in the choir. She is part of their youth group, their prayer group, all of that. However, it ends up getting out that she had an abortion, and very quickly the people that she thought were her friend turn against her. And throughout the story, we are kind of watching her deal with that situation. Because I did the live show, I'm not going to talk too much about my in-depth feelings on this book. Please feel free to check that out. I thought it was a very interesting conversation that we had. But I think that this book had some strengths when it came to the themes and the way that it made you think. However, like plot-wise, character-wise, it was a pretty basic YA book. I felt like it didn't do anything that really stood out, anything very memorable. It didn't really have overly strong characters in the book. I really feel like the author really just had something that she wanted to say, and she wanted to say it through this book. And so you can really tell that the themes are the strength, and the characters and the plot are just, I don't want to say an afterthought, but they were created for the purpose of upholding these themes and don't really have a life of their own, in my opinion. This is a retelling of The Scarlet Letter, so if you're familiar with that book, there will be aspects of this book that don't come as a surprise to you, because it does kind of follow some of the basic plot points of that book. I have to admit, I haven't read that book since high school, so I don't remember how close this is. But I think that if you're looking for a book that handles the topic of discussion and how the church handles abortions and the people who have abortions, this might be a good book for you. I think that the author is someone who is religious. However, she admits that there are things within the church that she just doesn't agree with, and clearly their stance on abortion is one of them. So if you're looking for a book that is pro-abortion, however, is still following a character who wants a life within the church and who is a believer of God, this book might be a good one for you. Despite me not being a religious person, I do enjoy reading books where there are people within the church and they kind of find themselves breaking out of the toxic aspect of the church and finding a healthier relationship with God. And that is something that our character is doing within this book. So I will warn you, there are aspects of grooming within this book, and it has some realistic aspects to it when it comes to a lack of consequences, especially for people involved in the church. The church is not very well known for handling grooming very well, and that is something that is addressed within this story. But I do think that I'm glad I chose it for a book club. Would I have enjoyed it as much if I wasn't thinking about it as critically, like as a book to start a conversation? Maybe not, but I do think that it is a good conversation starter. We had 2 4-star reads this month. The first of them is going to be All of Us Murderers by KJ Charles, and I got a hair on my hand, no surprise there. So KJ Charles, I can for the life of me not remember if I've read this author before. She's so well known within the queer historical romance genre that I feel like I must have read at least one book by her, but if I did, it was a very long time ago and I just can't recall. That being said, this book I wouldn't put primarily as romance. I would say the romance is definitely more of a subplot. It's definitely giving more historical mystery with a gothic element to it. We are following a character, Zeb, and he has been invited to his cousin's manor. He is usually not very involved with his family because he doesn't like his family. He has been portrayed by his brother after his father's death, and he has only gone to this manor because he hasn't seen this cousin for many years, and they've been corresponding via letters. So he's like, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and visit you. fine. However, when he ends up showing up, he sees his other cousin, who he absolutely hates, as well as his brother, who he also hates. And on top of that, there is one more person there that he did not expect to see, and that is his ex-lover, Gideon. I had to look up his name. So there's a lot of people there that he's not expecting to see. He's feeling a little overwhelmed. He's like, I don't want to be here. However, this cousin who invited him kind of drops the bomb that he has a female family member. She's like kind of cousin once removed kind of situation there, and he wants to make sure that she is cared for, meaning that he is going to go ahead and leave his inheritance, which is a lot of money, to whichever of the three ends up marrying her. And our character Zeb, who is a gay man, is like, I'm not interested in marrying this woman. No, thank you. Also, she's kind of young. This is weird. And so he decides that he's going to leave the situation. However, his cousin ends up telling him some things that make him decide it's better for him to stay, which ends up being a bit of a mistake because there seems to be a ghost haunting this estate. So this book has a bit of a paranormal aspect to it. Was it a big part of the story? No. Was I hoping that this book would have more gothic, eerie vibes to it? Yes. I don't think the author did a very good job with it. The kind of, is there a ghost or is there not a ghost aspect of the story, I think fell a little bit flat. I did, however, enjoy the family drama. I felt a visceral hate for a lot of the characters within this book. Our main character Zeb has ADHD, which obviously back in this time period, I don't even know if that was a thing. He certainly wasn't diagnosed with anything other than laziness and a lack of an attention span. And the way that he was treated by the people around him was very difficult to read. Even his ex-lover at times expressed frustration. However, throughout the story, the two of them started having a lot of important conversations that they probably should have had a year ago when they initially broke up. And it turns out that there was a certain amount of miscommunication between the two of them. His lover, Gideon, had not been out as a queer man before he met Zeb. Obviously, they're not out anyway because historically they would go to jail and maybe die, but he had never really explored that side of himself before he met Zeb, and so the relationship to him was a little bit new and overwhelming. He didn't really know how to handle it, and throughout this book he expresses a lot of his insecurities about the relationship and his inexperience. And Zeb talks a lot about how Gideon made him feel when it came to his different way of behaving, and the two of them, I think, really focused on kind of finding level ground between the two of each other. I really came to love their relationship. I think it was well fought for throughout the story, and I think both of them really took the time to learn more things about each other and really respected the needs of their partners. So I quite enjoyed the romance aspect of this book. I enjoyed the family drama that was occurring. It was very dramatic, so that was a lot of fun. But I think like vibes wise, it didn't quite give me the vibes that like a cover like this would give you in a haunted manor. So there were certain aspects of the story that definitely felt flat. However, in the end, I did have a fun time with this. I think that it had relatively good pacing, especially in the second half. Things really started to escalate, and that was quite exciting. So I'm glad I checked this out, and a solid 4-star it is. Yeah. Next 4-star read was another KU read, and that is going to be The Prince and His Stolen Groom by J.E. Ridge. I'm going to be honest, this is my third time trying to give a review about this book because I just keep getting sidetracked. right, talking about specific aspects of this book, and I'm like, okay, let's keep it concise and not confusing. So, concise. This book is a fantasy romance, and in this book, we are following four kingdoms that for a long time were constantly battling these evil wizards that were just causing a bunch of trouble. However, there was a good wizard that came to them and said, I can create a protective barrier around you that makes the evil wizards think that this is a miserable place. There's no reason for them to come here and bring misery because misery is already here. However, in order for this illusion to be sustained every generation for the next 3 generations, you need to marry within the 4 royal families. There has to be marriages between the 4 royal families, essentially 3 generations, because otherwise things would get a little incestuous. And in this book, we are following the 3rd and final generation, and our main character's sister is to be marrying the prince of another kingdom, which initially he was totally fine with. He's like, yep, that's fine. She's gonna get married. She seems okay with this. However, he discovers that she is a lesbian. Now, this is a queer normative world, so that's not really a problem, except for the fact that he realizes she is being forced to marry a man because this prince is the only child of the current king and queen, meaning he doesn't have any sisters or anything for her to marry, and he wants his sister to be happy, and he knows she's not going to be happy marrying a man. And so he decides he needs to find a way to keep the spell in place while also avoiding a marriage between his sister and this prince. And he decides the best way to do that is to kidnap the prince and stuff him into a magic tower so that he doesn't show up. And hopefully that gives him some extra time to kind of try to figure out what happens. Now, his plans get a little bit messy when the prince does show up. However, it is clearly someone impersonating the prince. And at first he's a little concerned about this, but his sister seems to be really vibing with this person. So he's like, okay, I'm going to let you handle that situation, and I'm going to go deal with the prince while also simultaneously trying to figure out what to do to make sure that the spell stays in place and our kingdoms are safe. Obviously, as he is kind of bouncing around between trying to figure this out and trying to explain his reasoning to this very angry, put off prince who's been locked in a tower, the two of them actually start enjoying each other's company, end up kind of being more attracted to each other. And of course, our character thinks that there really isn't a way for the two of them to be together, so he's kind of trying to repress these feelings and trying to prioritize protecting his sister and his kingdom, but everything is just a little bit messy because as the spell is weakening, the illusion is breaking and a evil wizard has entered the chat. And that just causes a lot more chaos. I thought that this book was just a fun, humorous time. I think that the author had a lot of fun with this book, and that means I, as a reader, had a lot of fun with it. It constantly had me laughing. There were times... It's almost 1 o'clock, so Tofu is like, it's an hour past my lunchtime. Let me just finish up this one review and I will feed you, I promise. Okay, let me finish up this review because my cat is literally like scratching at the door. So essentially, what was I saying? One of the humorous aspects of this book was that the author would sometimes break the fourth wall with the characters. There was a scene where one of these characters was in a very precarious situation. Their life seemed to be in danger, and one of the other characters was like, I'm not going to worry about this too much because this is a comedy, goddammit. So essentially, they're like, this is a fun time. This is a fun book. No terrible things are gonna happen, so I'm not gonna worry too much about the fact that someone seems to be dying right now. And it just had little moments like that throughout the story that really made me giggle and gave like a little bit of a unique twist to the story. I ended up enjoying their interactions between our two princes because it was very clear that one of the princes was trying to, hi baby, hi. It was very clear that one of the princes was trying to kind of seduce the other prince, and the other one was just like, no, I'm not gonna let that happen. It's just, I'm gonna resist. And he couldn't resist. And I always enjoy that kind of a tug and pull between a romance. I'm gonna feed you soon, I promise. The only reason that this didn't quite get a higher rating for me is just because I felt like there were certain aspects of the story that I didn't think were fleshed out well enough. It isn't the longest book, but I think I would have enjoyed a little bit more world building. I also feel like the author teased a little bit of like a bondage play at the beginning of this book, but we never really got to explore that. And I was a little bit bummed out about that because I was hoping that we would get a little bit kinkier. But overall, I did have a really fun time with this book. There are a couple of other books in this series that follow different characters. I believe it actually follows the son of one of these characters, I believe, and there's 2 books following him and a mage, so I am quite interested in continuing to read this series. Now I'm gonna go feed my cat and I will be back to finish up these reviews. All right, apologies for that interruption, not that it impacted you in any way, but cat mom's gotta do what a cat mom's gotta do. Let's jump into the 4.5 star rated books this month. I had 2 of them. One of them was the 3rd KU book that I read this month, and that is gonna be You Can Count on Me by Faye Quinn. I have read the first book in the series of the Christmas Daddies series, and I do believe I've enjoyed this one better. This has the single dad trope, it has neighbors, and it has what I would say would be a friends to lovers to family trope, and it was just such a feel-good story. I honestly think the only reason that this didn't get a 5-star is because it is on the longer side, not quite 500 pages, but definitely well over 400 pages. And when it comes to contemporary romances, I feel like once we start creeping over that 350 mark, sometimes things get a little repetitive, especially when it comes to like the conversations that characters have in their heads, especially when it revolves around like their insecurities. Like, do I deserve this? Am I good enough for them? Do they want me the way that I want them? Those are just conversations that they have in their head again and again. And it becomes a little bit noticeable when the book is that long. But outside of that, oh my gosh, did I love this book. Oh my gosh, yes. So we are following Miles, who is known by many people as Rooster, and he has his young son who he calls Bubba. I love Bubba. Then we have our other character, Trent, and he is the brother of one of the main characters in the first book. Essentially, this series, we are following a group of brothers who come from a relatively large, prominent family in this small town. And Trent is kind of known as a bit of a player. He kind of sleeps around a lot. He's not really someone who wants a deep romantic relationship. He's not really looking for monogamy. At least that's what he's telling himself. He's getting to that point in his life where he's starting to think maybe that is what he wants. You know, maybe he does want a family. Maybe he wants to settle down a little bit. He is someone who is running the family Christmas farm. He puts a lot of pressure on himself because he's actually the youngest in the family, and he had a really close relationship with his father and took it very hard when his father got sick and ended up dying. He's constantly trying to live up to this amazing, perfect man that he saw his father to be. And so because he felt like his father was the perfect parent, the perfect friend, the perfect businessman, the perfect husband. He feels like he isn't perfect at any of those things, and so why even pursue it? On the other hand, we have Miles, who has a pretty extreme anxiety disorder to the point where he has almost, I would like to say select mutism, but it isn't, because he like physically, when he's around, specifically Trent, is unable to like speak because he is so anxious around him. And he has had a crush on Trent for many years. And Miles' son, Bubba, one day marches across the street to Trent's house with his little baseball bat. He's probably like 8 years old, and he says, waving his little bat around, "If you don't take my dad on a date, I'm gonna beat you up with this bat." And so Trent decides to take Miles on a date. It does not go well. And so they kind of just say, hey, it's not gonna work out. We'll just be neighbors. However, Trent ends up overhearing Miles kind of defend him to his mother, because Trent's mother is always like, hey, you know, my son, I know he's a bit of a player, but you know, please give him a second chance. I know the date went bad. And Miles was like, hey, it wasn't your son's fault that the date went bad. He was really great. He really was. It just didn't work out. So please don't blame him for this. Don't speak down about him. I don't want you to do that. And Trent hears this and he's like, oh my gosh, that was really great to hear. You know, like I haven't heard anyone really stand up for me like that, especially against my mother, who's a very intimidating woman. And so he decides to go ahead and make himself part of Miles and Bubba's life in a friendship capacity. However, his feelings towards Miles obviously end up increasing into something more. I feel like this definitely had a bit of a slow burn aspect to it, because we had two characters who clearly were really vibing with each other, but because of that first date, they were really kind of taking it slow and making sure that they really were compatible with each other, that both of them were comfortable with moving forward in their relationship. Trent was very aware that Miles is a single father and that what he does needs to be good for his son as well. Trent, watching him fall in love with Bubba and just like starting to almost act like this father figure to him and being like protective of him. I loved it so much, because this whole time Trent was like, I could never be a dad. But then he ends up being this incredible father figure to Bubba and ends up filling certain roles in Bubba's life that Miles just wasn't able to fill because of his anxiety disorder. It was very clear that Bubba, to a degree, felt the need to protect his father and remove certain stressors from his life. And so Trent was this person that Bubba could go to with some of his issues that he just didn't feel comfortable sharing with his father. And so that was really great to see. And of course, the more that Miles grew comfortable with Trent and started to loosen up a little bit, the more Bubba felt like he didn't need to protect his father anymore, and it allowed their relationship to grow closer as well. So there were so many amazing things in this story. This friends to lovers situation was absolutely perfect. They were so sweet together. I absolutely adore Miles. Miles is this really big, strong guy, and he states that like a lot of the people that he's been in a relationship with want him to be kind of this dominating presence, both in the bedroom and in their relationship. And he is someone who wants someone to care for him, to protect him and his son. And when it comes to the bedroom, he wants to be the one who is dominated. He wants to be a bottom, essentially, but because of his size, so many people assume that he's just gonna be a top. And Trent kind of gives him that opportunity to have all of those experiences, to have the relationship that he always wanted to have. And it was just so wonderful, so sweet, so sexy. I loved like pretty much every moment of this book and am very eager to read more by this author. I highly recommend this book when it comes to male romances. I know that it's called Christmas Daddies, but really I wouldn't consider it a Christmas book aside from the fact that this book kind of ends around Christmas time. So overall, I don't think you have to read it during the Christmas season. And I'm very eager for the next book because it follows Trent's brother, his older brother, who has twin girls, and Miles's brother, who is like a rock star, who was kind of mentioned throughout the story because Miles and his brother had a very rough upbringing with a mother who held a lot of resentment towards them, and his brother kind of ran off and became a rock star, but Miles keeps a very close eye on his brother, and it's very clear that he's not doing well mentally and like health-wise. And so at the end of this book, his brother is like, I'm coming home. And I'm like, he's gonna come home and he's gonna have a romance of his own and he's a rock star. And I am so excited for that. Second to last book, and the other 4.5 star, is actually gonna be the last book that I read this year. I'm so glad I ended this year on a high note. I read Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. I have to admit, after filming my worst books of the year, so many of those books were short stories. And so picking this up, I was like, great, I've kind of proven that I don't like short stories. So what am I gonna think about this? I'm gonna think very highly of this book. There is no surprise that this book has made it onto people's best books of the year. This was so interesting. This had such interesting monsters and creatures and lore within it that I was thoroughly fascinated by this book, and the ability to really flesh out these creatures and their existence and purpose for existence all within such a short story. I think that shows a lot of talent within this author. So this is a historical horror story. We are set in 1922 is when this book is set, and essentially we are following this woman who works as a monster hunter. She works with a group of people who have the ability to see these monsters for what they really are. There are a lot of people who are not able to see them. They see them as regular Klan members. We're talking about the Ku Klux Klan here. So essentially, some of the Klan members have gone ahead and been filled with so much hate that they have actually been taken over by these monsters, by another dimension, from another dimension, and these people, our main character and the other two women that she's working with, go out and hunt them. And at the beginning of this book, they are starting to figure out that there is going to be a very big gathering, that there is a new player on the field, a very dangerous player, and they need to try to figure out how to stop this, because it's very clear that these monsters are no longer satisfied with just going after Klan members. They are going to try to expand their reach. Obviously, a huge topic of this book is hate. Specifically, they are obviously going after hate caused by racism because it's such a prominent form of hate, but really these monsters will consume and thrive off of any sort of hate. And in fact, there is this really great line where this monster says, "Your hate is even better," because their hate is so weak and unnecessary that it's pretty much like watered down whiskey. Like, why do they hate you? They literally have no reason. So it's just not as good of a hate as the hate that you feel towards the people that have destroyed your family, that have harmed your communities. And I feel like it was this really interesting discussion about the dangers of blind hatred and how much it really rots you and turns you into a monster, how it just doesn't just hurt the people that you hate, but that it really does something rotten to you as well. I really, like I said, enjoyed the monsters and the lore. There wasn't just the monsters that they were hunting in this book. They were talking about other beings in other dimensions, and I've just found them so fascinating that there is a part of me that hopes that he writes more within this world, because the ending, I mean, Goodreads doesn't show this as a series, but the ending of this book kind of like left the door open for more, and I hope the author takes advantage of this. I found our characters very interesting. Our main character is filled with a lot of trauma that she has never addressed, and she kind of just like stuffs this trauma deep inside of her and uses it almost as like this coal to keep the fire of her hatred burning so that she can continue to seek revenge against these monsters. But at the end of this book, she really needs to come face to face with her own trauma so that she can reach her full potential. I really, really love this book. The messaging, the writing, the plot, the world building, all of it was really fascinating, and I'm really glad that I went ahead and picked up this book. And despite being on the short side, I had a wonderful time with it. Could I have used more? Could I have used a little bit more time with some of the side characters, especially since there was a death within this book that I felt would have been a lot more impactful if we had gotten to spend a little bit more time with some of these characters. But other than that, I fully recommend this book. It can be rather gross. It's kind of a grody book. There's gross stuff happening in it. It is 100% horror, but all the same, I had a good time with it. All right, I feel like I've been filming for 10,000 years, but we are here on our final book and the one book that ended up getting 5 stars this month, and that is going to be The Nightmare Before Christmas by Sarah Rash. What a surprise. I mean, I in no way thought that I would dislike this book. Obviously, I would not have bought it if I thought I would dislike it, but I did not know that this book would have me in such a chokehold. I came to love every moment of this book. This is technically a fantasy romance. We are following the Prince of Christmas as well as the Prince of Halloween. And our Prince of Christmas, despite being the oldest son, is a little bit of a screw up. He is someone who uses his humor very frequently, and in a way it's almost like a defense mechanism. Like he feels that that is his role and all that he has to offer. However, at the beginning of this book, he starts to see that maybe the way that he has been acting is just not what's best for him and for the people around him. He is feeling a little bit lost about the role that he is meant to play in the lives of those around him, as well as his role as the future heir of Christmas. He is kind of blindsided at the beginning of this book when his father announces that he is to marry the Easter Princess. He and the Easter Princess have been friends for a very long time. They are a couple of bi-disasters. Despite that, they don't want to get married, okay? They don't see each other that way. They are just friends. And so both of them are very blindsided by this. The Easter Princess, her kingdom has been struggling. Her father has been rather weak since the death of her mother, and she is willing to go forward with this marriage if it helps her father kind of hold on to power and to make sure that her holiday doesn't suffer. And our character is willing to go through with it because it's what's best for her. She decided that's what's best for her, and as her friend, he wants to help her with that, but at the same time, he acknowledges this isn't something he wants, and it's not something that she wants either. Things get a little complicated when Halloween shows up and says, we are not okay with this marriage. Christmas has been accumulating a lot of power. It's way too powerful for one holiday, and the fact that you are looking to go and create an alliance with a spring holiday, not even just a winter holiday, a spring holiday, is just not okay. We're not okay with that. And Christmas says, yeah, we understand if you want to send one of your princes, and at the end the princess of Easter will decide who she's gonna marry. We're willing to do that as a compromise. Obviously, Christmas is not actually intending on letting this be a fair fight, but they have to go ahead and create the illusion. And so the Prince of Halloween shows up, and turns out that the Prince of Halloween is someone that our character actually recognizes. He is someone that our prince shared a very passionate kiss with like a year or so ago, and so our prince is instantly completely thrown off by this man's presence, and he just can't stop thinking about him, and the two of them are just drawn to each other. They cannot help it, and so they are very much trying to keep the fact that they are falling for each other a secret. They're trying to figure out how to do what's best for each other, for themselves, but also for their holidays. I mean, these are both the future heirs of their holidays, so that is something that they do have to keep at the forefront of their minds. I loved the emotional aspect of this story. I did not think it would be so emotional. However, there were so many deep conversations that our characters were having, and it's not just between our two princes. These are conversations that our Christmas prince is having with his younger brother, who has taken on kind of the role of cleaning up our prince's mistakes, or kind of picking up our prince whenever he stumbles, and he's kind of viewing his brother in this different light as this integral part of his life that he feels like he's been taking advantage of. So I really enjoyed how his relationship with his brother developed. Obviously, his relationship with the Easter princess is continuing to change. You know, he is realizing that maybe he hasn't been the best friend because of his class clown way of acting. She hasn't always felt like she could talk to him about very serious things. So he's working on being someone who can be there for his friends and give them what they need in the moment, and not just joke it away. And then of course there's a relationship with his father. His father has a bit of a chokehold on Christmas. He's very passionate about making sure that Christmas is strong and that it is expanding across the world and bringing joy to everyone, but the way that he's doing it is just not in a way that our character agrees with. And so he's having to have these really difficult conversations with this man that he has kind of had a bit of a complicated relationship for a very long time. And then of course it's just the way that our character is reevaluating who he is as a person, the kind of leader that he wants to be. And there was just so many moments within this book where I was just like, we stand communication within a romance. We really do. So much great communication, so much great banter, so many cute and sexy moments. I will say that from what I remember, this is probably one of the most romantic sex scenes that I have read in a long time. It's not Fade to Black, but it's not as detailed as you sometimes get from more smutty scenes. Like I said, it was very tasteful and romantic, and I absolutely loved that scene. And I absolutely adored the characters. This book just was so much more than I thought it would be, and I am very eager to read more by this author. I know that her new Wizard Rivals book, I can't remember exactly what it's called, is getting a lot of love, and that quite a few people are talking about crying while reading it. And now that I've read this, I know that she fully has the capabilities to write a story that'll make you cry, because you just feel so much for her characters. So very happy that I was able to go ahead and pick this up this Christmas season, and am eager to read more by this author. All right, guys, so those are the 8 books that I read this month. My shoulders hurt. I don't know what it is about holding up books, but it like hurts my shoulders. So I've been standing here for over an hour because some of these books I really struggled to figure out what I wanted to say about them. My brain is just a little slower today than I would like it to be, but I hope that you still enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Also, let me know what your worst and best book of the month were. My worst book of the month was unfortunately one of the Christmas books I read, which is A Spiked Hot Chocolate, and my best book was one of the other Christmas books I read, and that is going to be A Nightmare Before Christmas. So some success and some flops when it came to the Christmas reading. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!